Have you ever felt like you're just living in a separate reality from the rest of the world? What if I told you that everything you've ever assumed about the games industry and video game executives was absolutely true? Eerily so. That these guys call you sheep behind your backs, that they say they don't need to QA their games because you're going to do it for them, and that their focus is to make the most predatory systems possible to try to manipulate you out of your money. Recently, the $100 video games discussion has come back, and with it, this time, they're saying that the market demands it. It has to happen, and they need more aggressive monetization to what they believe is going to be zero pushback. They say that you're just going to buy it anyway. Recently, a former Call of Duty and Activision executive has come forward to talk about how he believes he is going to fix the problems in the games industry by advocating for $100 games and microtransactions in indie games. This is the worst interview that I've ever read. These profit-addicted parasites will ruin everything they possibly can, while completely ignoring the fact that video game prices on average are crashing through the floor, consoles aren't selling, we're entering into a job market where there are fewer jobs than there are people that are applying to those jobs. We have younger generations that have all but just stopped buying games. Meanwhile, these people are out there, the media, for the most part, are going out and criticizing these kids for not having any money when it's their fault they don't have any. So today what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce you guys to the world of video game executives and how they ruin everything. I'm sorry. Today's video is sponsored by Raycon. Now that the holidays are over, this is usually the part of the year where I start trying to get back into some kind of routine, gym, walking more, pretending like I have my life together. And one thing that I've actually stuck with this year are Raycon's bone conduction headphones. These aren't normal earbuds. They sit outside of your ears and use bone conduction, so the sound travels through vibrations instead of blocking out your ears completely, which I didn't think that I really cared about until I actually started using them. At the gym, I'll throw on music for lifting, or when I'm on the treadmill, I'll just straight up watch some anime on my phone. The big difference is that I can actually hear what's going on around me, people moving, machines, announcements, without having to pause or pull anything out of my ears every 5 minutes. It sounds small, but it makes your workouts a lot less annoying. They're also just more comfortable for longer sessions. No earbuds digging into your ears, no slipping once you start sweating, and they're built for it. 13 hours of battery life, IP68 waterproof and dustproof, so sweat, rain, or whatever else, they're going to be fine, and I don't even have to think about them when I'm wearing them. Raycon delivers premium performance without the premium price tag. The quality is right up there with big audio brands, but you're not paying for some inflated name. Over 3 million people are already using Raycon, and they back it with a 30-day happiness guarantee, and, well, that's just how this stuff should work. It's the perfect time to upgrade your audio for the new year, so go to buyraycon.com/legendarydropsbc to get 20% off site-wide. Thank you to Raycon for sponsoring today's video. When I say it feels like I'm living in an alternate reality, I mean it. I look around right now, and honestly, I don't know who these people think they're talking to. Executives, politicians, the media, all acting like they can tell you the sky is red and you won't notice, as if people can't fact-check their bullshit in 10 seconds. For the past 2 years, we've watched as journalists and executives have cheered on the idea of $100 games. Journalists because it's going to generate clicks, outrage, and easy discourse for them, and executives because they've convinced themselves that it's necessary for survival. A lesson you would think that they would have learned by now, considering that Xbox floated an $80 Outer Worlds 2 and nobody showed up, somehow managing to have less players than Avowed. Nintendo had their own version of that, padding the adoption numbers with an $80 Mario Kart World by bundling it with hardware and calling it demand. Outside of indie, this industry is visibly trying to warp itself into something unrecognizable, a system obsessed with draining players, developers, and games themselves until there's just nothing left to take. I think that truth has always been there, but it used to be spoken quietly. Now, the mask is gone, and these guys are just saying it out loud. Last month, a former Call of Duty director gave an interview to Esport Bets in an article titled Former Call of Duty Creative Director Greg Riesdorf on how the series must evolve, what he's doing to fix some of the biggest issues in gaming, and why he dreams of a Grand Theft Auto in space. Man, a former Activision executive talking to a betting site about fixing video games. I mean, how could this go wrong? Buckle up, guys. You're in for a wild ride. In the article, Greg talks at length about his new business, Oncade, a monetization platform specifically built for AA and indie games. It offers tools for payouts, creator revenue share, in-game marketplaces, virtual currencies, and monetized user-generated content. These systems, he claims, were once things that they wanted to pursue inside of Activision, but ultimately didn't because at some point, Call of Duty was making so much money they just didn't care anymore. Even in the context of creator codes, that quote is so good. It doesn't just explain why those systems never materialized inside of Call of Duty, it explains the entire Call of Duty mindset. You could easily apply this to the phoned-in entries, the increasing prices, and the complete removal of value from that series. He then goes on to talk about offering indie devs similar monetization opportunities, comparing it to Call of Duty's live service structure that he refers to as the content treadmill, a system that once you start, you can never stop feeding it. This isn't about creative ambition or players or games anymore. It's just about continuing to make sure that machine keeps moving and the slop farm keeps going. Content isn't something that you make because it's meaningful or finished. It's just something that you just continue to shove into a pipe because, well, stopping isn't an option because you're going to make less money. The exact kind of influence that we want inside of indie games. After that, he splits the audience literally into the haves and have-nots. Riesdorf explains how people who don't have the money but do have the time can still be made useful, not by playing the game, but by feeding the system, converting surplus time into labor through user-generated content and creator monetization. Now, what makes this moment incredibly revealing to me is that the developers pushed back against it, but it just went straight over this dude's head. They told him directly, that's cool, but I'd really like to have a game that people played first. Devs not asking for monetization loops. They're just asking for visibility, reach, and an audience that actually wants to play their game. And his response wasn't even about games at all. Instead, he says, so we went closer to the revenue share side, figuring out how we could work with creators and get them revenue share on game sales and key sales. We're starting to see more and more pickup from publishers who are interested in that. This is so dystopian. How is this stuff even real? When developers say we want people to want the game, the only thing this guy can think of is turning players, creators, and communities into distribution nodes, making everybody a part of an ecosystem that's economically useful whether they want to be or not. The brain rot only continues when he was asked what was the one biggest decision or feature you and your teams brought to Call of Duty that, looking back, had the greatest impact on the franchise as a whole. He responds, loot boxes. You can't make this up, saying that for Advanced Warfare, the loot boxes became this pincushion, right? But the entire loot system was a reward system, and the loot boxes became the monetization system on top of that. The actual reward system of being able to be rewarded with different weapons, different outfits, and all that stuff, it was huge to the franchise. When we were pitching that, the response was, we're selling bacon skins for $2. Why would we get rid of that and try this new reward system out? That ended up being huge for the franchise as a whole. Man, this is exactly what I'm talking about when I say that these guys are terrible for the games industry. They are a plague on the games industry. They don't care about games or players. All they care about is extraction. Loot boxes didn't just go too far. They permanently warped how rewards work in games. They hollowed out progression. They stripped meaning from achievement. And they replaced it with a damn slot machine. And this guy's proud of it. So proud of it that he wants to bring it to indie games. And what used to feel earned now became something you buy. And that rot didn't disappear when loot boxes did. It just metastasized. Monetization is almost entirely replaced reward design. So few games feel genuinely rewarding anymore because the feedback loop isn't built around mastery or discovery or satisfaction. It's built around compulsion, timers, drip-fed progress, artificial friction, all tuned to keep the player hovering just short of enough so the easiest solution is for them to pay. It is abusive psychology that's masquerading as design, rewiring how people are interacting with games, not just to keep us engaged, but instead to condition us. Players aren't chasing fun anymore. They're just mashing the reward button like lab animals, except the button is now our credit card and the prize is a banana suit. After that, he just keeps talking, and somehow it just continues to get worse. When asked about how teams balance internal data against community feedback, he confirms every bad assumption that players have ever had. He brags about empowering teams to listen to the community, and then immediately pivots to how QA is a problem because testing everything takes too long, so he'd rather just push it live. And he says when players complain about being used as testers, his response was, the community will say, we're now the QA testers, but either you want the change or not. No accountability, no concern, just ship it and see who breaks, I guess. Then he moves on to matchmaking, where he openly admits that they manipulate skill perception, pad lobbies with bots so players don't quit, and smooth over losses so people keep playing, not for fairness, not for fun, for retention, for control, for keeping, in his own words, the sheep available for the wolves. Then the conversation finally turns towards video game pricing, and this is where things get really good because he's asked, while we're talking about the business models behind gaming today and how smaller teams can monetize their work, where do you stand on the looming idea of a $100 price tag for games in the AAA space? He starts off by predicting the end of free-to-play altogether, arguing that there are simply too many games that are spending hundreds of millions of dollars only to launch and die the next day, something that I actually finally agree with in this article, until he says his solution is not restraint or better games, it's just to return to premium price titles with microtransactions. Then he's asked directly, does the release schedule of Call of Duty make it harder to ask players to pay $100 every year or even every other year compared to Grand Theft Auto that at this point takes a decade or more to release? And he responds with, once you do it once and stick a $100 price tag on your game, it's just going to go up across the industry. Other games will follow. I don't think Call of Duty will be the first one to do it, but at some point, the market demands it. Your investors are going to be asking why you haven't done this, and the cost to create these games are super high. I want to make it painfully obvious that anytime the $100 games discussion comes up, anytime game prices ever come up, notice how we are never a part of the discussion. In the long list of achievements that this guy is so proud of, the things that he's doing, the damage that he's going to do to this games industry, not a single time are we ever brought up anything other than just being consumers. These faceless organisms that are floating about, these useful idiots that'll line up to buy the next thing, that'll swipe the card for the next skin. Or in his case, the thing that they're really excited about right now, which is turning us into people that are making content for them so they can sit back and just rake in all of the profits. The one thing that I will say that I find really funny about all of this is how developers actually pushed back and said, yeah, that's cool, but we just want people to want to play our game. It goes right over this dude's head, and he then pivots to, oh, well, we'll turn content creators into commission-based salespeople. These suits do not belong in a creative industry. They represent a very real rot within the games industry, something that I think is more venomous and damaging than ideological differences that we may see sometimes. I mean, we have a AAA executive talking to betting agencies. That's bad enough by itself. But this is an industry that has almost entirely put the games, the players, the developers, the process behind the money, behind the business, behind the stock prices, behind the investors. And it has done so much damage to video games. It's so revealing to see somebody like them, to hear somebody like him, a former Activision creative director turned monetization strategist that is now bearing his fangs towards AA and indie, all because they see the success that those guys are getting and they want to get a slice of that, and they think the best way for them to get rich is to siphon off of their success, to include all the things that they've done to the rest of the industry to these indie games. And the one thing that these guys don't seem to understand is the reason why these independent games have done so well is because they haven't had to use middlemen like them. They don't have to be involved with them. And players have done everything we possibly can to avoid people like him and the games they influence. $100 games. Set the price and everybody will follow. Man, he makes that sound really easy. These guys love living in a reality that just doesn't exist. People don't have the money. They don't have the jobs. We have younger generations have almost entirely given up on AAA. They are so disillusioned by it all. And I don't know where these guys think the money's going to be coming from. I don't think they know where the players are going to be coming from. And if these guys chase it, they're going to fail. And part of me wants them to do it because I would love to watch it happen. Now, what I love is that this guy is wrong, immediately and emphatically wrong. How is he claiming that once a single game sets a $100 price point, that the rest of the industry will follow? My guy, we already watched publishers try to push a far smaller price increase and fail. Outer Worlds 2 floated $80, and they quietly walked that back. Mario Kart World is the only real example of $80 sticking, and even that came bundled with hardware at launch, padded by circumstances more than anything else. Since then, nothing, not a single major release has been above $70. If these companies can't normalize $10, then what is the idea that you're trying to come up with that suddenly they're going to be able to jump to $100? That's pure fantasy. Now, I will say he is right about one thing, and that's that Grand Theft Auto 6 could probably get away with it, but that's not because $100 games are inevitable. It's just because Grand Theft Auto is a genuine anomaly. It's a franchise it's the only franchise that exists completely outside of genre loyalty, platform tribalism, and gamer identity. People who don't play games buy GTA. People who haven't touched a controller in a decade are going to buy GTA. It's not sold as a product or service. It's sold as a event, a place, a cultural moment. Grand Theft Auto also functions as a cultural time capsule of sorts. Each entry is sharp, exaggerated. It's this parody of a moment released into the ether. It's the media, the politics, the celebrity culture, the technology, the social anxieties. It feels recognizable even when it's absurd, and that's why people who don't even follow games still get GTA almost immediately. Now, you could argue that the hype is excessive and the expectations are out of control, and I would absolutely agree with you, but none of that changes the reality. GTA is just that game that's the only game that has an audience that large and that broad to even attempt a $100 price tag, and that doesn't prove the rule. It just shows how completely isolated this exception is. Any game that thinks to attempt this is just going to drown immediately. Even Call of Duty, one of the most popular and recognized franchises in all of existence, still has a limited scope in who their audience is and how many people they can capture. There are other options when it comes to competitive shooters, when it comes to RPGs, to fighting games, to nearly every other game under the sun, but there isn't a replacement for GTA. Now, beyond that, the idea of a $100 game doesn't even line up with what is actually happening in the market. Recently, in a newsletter from Games Discover Co., writer Simon Carless broke down what is effectively a pricing crash on Steam in an article titled, "Are Steam Game Prices Dropping and Should You Care?" He starts by laying out the price spread of the top-selling games back in September of 2025, and the pattern is almost immediately obvious. A large cluster of games at $5 to $10, another at $15 to $20, and almost nothing living in the middle. The $25 to $55 range is almost entirely hollowed out, and what's left after that is a few $60 to $70 premium releases, many of which are sitting lower on the sales list, while the cheaper games are consistently outperforming them in sheer units sold. In other words, pricing has been completely polarized. Either you are a big $70 franchise or you are competing aggressively under $20, and the cheap side is winning. He then backs that up with long-term data charting the median and average prices of the top 50 new non-free-to-play games on Steam each month since early 2023. The average price barely moves, a negligible 2% drop because a handful of expensive games skew that mean, but the median tells the real story. It's a 20% fall. That means that most of the games people are actually buying are getting cheaper, not more expensive, and they've been trending that way for nearly 2.5 years. And to that, all I can say is, finally, I have hard data that is backing up what I've been saying for the past 2 years. This industry has kept insisting that higher prices and heavier monetization are inevitable for whatever reason, but that just couldn't be any further from reality. The games that are dominating conversation, streaming, and day-to-day engagement are overwhelmingly under $70. Meanwhile, AAA releases they just haven't had the same motion that they used to have anymore. People are not buying them. People are not playing them. People are just not as excited about them anymore, and I don't really think that's going to change anytime soon. I mean, look at the quality of these games. Sure, you could slap a $100 price tag on Grand Theft Auto and people would probably still show up, but try that with Call of Duty, Assassin's Creed, Pokémon, or even Madden, and that's just going to collapse immediately. There isn't a single AAA franchise outside of some extreme outliers that would be able to justify that price, and deep down, even the people that are making these games, they know it. That's why not a single one of them is actually trying it. None of these games are delivering on the price tag that they already have. What are we even talking about? Most of what we see from AAA right now is rehashes and remakes of the same tired franchises that are pushed out on a near yearly cycle. They are old news, they don't do anything new, and half the time, they barely even launch in a working state. I mean, are we forgetting about Randy Pitchford coming out and saying that real fans would pay $80 for Borderlands 4, the same Borderlands 4 that launched with abysmal performance that players couldn't even play and that most people dropped almost immediately because of how shallow the overall game is? Even setting quality aside, this just isn't a financial reality anymore, and I don't think that it ever will be. We just watched it blow up in real time this holiday season. Console prices are up roughly 30% over the past 5 years, many of them now pushing well over $500, and the reward for that was some of the weakest sales that we've seen in 30 years this past holiday season. The price hikes didn't normalize, they just backfired. People do not have the money for this, full stop. Have these guys even looked outside the window? Have they even maybe looked at the job market even once? I mean, games are primarily made for younger audiences, and that audience is getting absolutely kneecapped right now. Jobs are disappearing, pay isn't keeping up, and the few opportunities that still exist are completely clogged. And then you layer on top of that an unchecked rush into AI, which is just accelerating the damage. Entry-level work has been the first thing to get wiped out. Hiring outlooks for 2026 are sliding towards 5-year lows, and every remaining opening has hundreds or thousands of applicants that are piled on top of it. Investors are openly talking about how much labor is expected to just get replaced over the next couple of years, while new graduates in real time are watching as the ladder is getting pulled up right in front of them. And what do these younger players, what do these younger generations and customers get in response? Nothing, not solutions. They get gaslighting. The same systems that are shutting the door in their face are throwing insults at them, calling them lazy people, running hit pieces on them, calling them stay-at-home sons and stay-at-home dads, pretending that it's motivation that's the problem instead of it just being a setup. This is why the $100 fantasy collapses the moment it touches reality. The market isn't asking for higher prices. Players are not positioned to be able to absorb them, and the games that are being made simply do not deserve that price. What we are watching right now is an industry that is not responding to demand. It's an industry that's trying to justify itself. It's an industry that is trying to brute force a solution to its own failures by charging more for less, louder, and faster. And the most damning part of this is, if $100 games were actually inevitable, well, they wouldn't have to keep trying to explain why they are. I wouldn't be surprised at all to learn that Gen Z and Gen A are completely jaded against AAA. I would be if I were them. I'm advocating for you guys. I have no idea where these executive heads are at right now. What do they think is going to happen when more jobs get sucked out of the market? Do they think the government is going to swoop in and subsidize our video games? These guys are more likely to use this as batteries for data centers. The market demands it. I personally love that he unironically uses the meme that I use against them, which is, what will the investors think? He literally says it. They're going to start asking why you haven't raised your price. Probably because your games aren't selling. And there's not enough customers that are out there to be able to justify or buy games that are so aggressively priced. You know, outside of a lack of money, the other thing is that there's just more options. There's better options. You know, looking at the rise of free-to-play games, while I definitely have plenty of criticisms to share there, there's a reason why gacha games and games like Fortnite are as popular as they are. They offer an obscene amount of content. So much content. These guys don't got to do anything else. Then on top of that, you have indie, and that's just another beast entirely. You know, with indie games, I feel like we're living in the best of times and the worst of times, because we have AAA, which is actively trying to implode the video games industry, and at the exact same time, we have indie that makes it feel like we're being teleported back to early 2000s, where it's just banger after banger, and these games are innovative, they're new, they're fresh, they're fun, they're way more fun than anything else that's out on the market, and we get the added benefit that they're less than the price to get a full tank of gas. Well, actually, by a long shot. They're also less than getting fast food. I looked at my game purchases, my entire set of game purchases for 2025. 75 games I played, which I'm actually pretty damn proud of, to be honest with you. I put in some work for sure. But out of those games, only 10 of them were AAA. 4 of them were free to play. And the rest of the games were all indie games that were $20 or less. Which means that out of the 10 AAA games, they accounted for more than 50% of the money I spent on video games. Think about that for a second. And I'm going to tell you right now, out of those 10 AAA games that I played, maybe 1 or 2 of them at most was actually worth the money or the time that I spent playing it, whereas nearly every single indie game that I played felt worth the money that I spent. How are you going to figure that out? Value proposition is way out of whack on this one. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you guys did enjoy the video, this is a video you want to like, you want to comment, you want to share with your friends and everywhere you possibly can. Increase my influence, make me more popular. Thank you guys for watching. Catch me on Twitch, catch me on Kick, follow me on Twitter. Stay cool, stay righteous, stay safe.